We only said goodbye with words. I know 100 times. I go back to her and you go back to.
Two shining, arrogant eyes had established dominance over his face and gave him the appearance of always leaning aggressively forward. This quote is used to describe the intimidating character of Tom Buchanan. Throughout the first chapter, we see a lot of examples of how Tom's character is quite intimidating and very aggressive and dominant.
Yeah, so in the very first chapters, this quote is from chapter 1, and from the very first chapters, the motif of eyes is used as a descriptor for characters. So for example, in this quote, Tom Buchanan is described as having arrogant eyes. So by describing Tom's character as having arrogant eyes, you're basically establishing his character as being arrogant, aggressive, him leaning over, strong character. So the motif is mainly used as a descriptor in these early chapters.
Great job, Old Spool.
My pleasure. She smiled slowly, and walking through her husband as if he were a ghost, shook hands with Tom, looking at him flush in the eye.
Hey, hubby. The usage of eyes in this quote serves to establish a mood between Tom and Myrtle. Rather than appear skittish around Tom, Myrtle is depicted as having a confident demeanor as demonstrated by looking him flush in the eyes. This confidence in turn works to solidify Myrtle's obvious disregard of her husband and their relationship as asserted earlier in the sentence.
Once again, we have here in the early chapters, this quote is from chapter 2, we have the usage of the motif of eyes as a descriptor. Once again, instead of Tom being described as arrogant, this time Myrtle is being described as a confident person. You know, she's basically flat out ignoring her husband, acting as if he was a ghost, and walking straight to Tom, and obviously being very confident with him as well. So this time, once again, the usage of the motif of eyes is used as a descriptor in the early chapters.
I've got a nice place here, he said, flashing about his eyes restlessly. Got a nice place here. By describing Tom's eyes as restless, the author once again uses the motif of eyes to build a character and their characteristics. Buchanan's restless eyes betray that he is overly eager to establish dominance, using his material possessions to promote his superiority over the considerably less wealthy Nick. The description also serves to highlight Tom's self-centered and narcissistic manner.
Yeah, so once again, we have here, this quote is from chapter 1, and once again, in the very early chapters, we don't know a lot about the characters, so the motif of eyes is used as a description to build the character up and basically create a mood, create that person's traits. And in this case, once again, Tom is being established as having a narcissistic, very confident demeanor about him that overshadows Nick's lesser, less bold personality.
I laughed aloud as the yolks of their eyeballs rolled towards us in haughty rivalry. Fusion of eyes as a descriptor for the three Negroes serves to establish imagery in this particular scene. The jealous eyes of the Negroes also work simultaneously with assertions earlier in the paragraph regarding the true magnificence of Gatsby's car. If Gatsby's car can make even individuals in limos jealous, it must hold considerable wealth.
All right, so this quote is from chapter 4, and we see a continuation of the assertion I made in the previous quote, whereas basically we see a transition from the usage of the motif of eyes from a descriptory term, such for example, Tom is aggressive, Myrtle is confident, into describing the New York society as a whole, and that New York society as immoral and dishonorable. And we see that in these Negroes, they're rivaling Gatsby based on his car. You know, it's just material possessions. We see that in the New York society in the 1920s, material possessions are worth more than basically anything else. It doesn't matter who you are, it doesn't matter if you're a kind person, it doesn't matter if you're a respectful person, but what car do you have and I'm going to rival you based on that, and I'm going to want to look up to you based on that. We see that transition into seeing the New York society rather than just descriptory terms for the usage of the motif of eyes.
The eyes of T.J. Eckleburg are blue and gigantic. Their retinas are 1 yard high. They look out of no face, but instead from a pair of enormous yellow spectacles which pass over a non-existent nose.
The eyes of Dr. Eckleburg serve as a blatant usage of symbolism in Fitzgerald's novel. Once again, Fitzgerald draws attention to the eyes of an individual when they are introduced. In this case, the eyes of Eckleburg forge a similarity between the character of another book, Big Brother from Orwell's 1984. Although only used as a business tactic by the Doctor, the eyes connote an additional feeling of always being watched and judged based on social status.
Yeah, so this quote is also in chapter 2, but the difference between this quote and the last two quotes is we see a transition from the usage of the motif of eyes as something just used as, description. For example, we saw Tom Buchanan being described as having a confident persona. So we see a transition from that into something different. And that something different is sort of like an omnipresent sort of feel, like a supernatural being is always looking over you. That's why we compared it to George Orwell's 1984 and Big Brother, and that there's always somebody watching you and judging you. And in the Valley of Ashes, it's considered a inferior place to the both West and East Egg, and in this case, it's where Tom is coming basically to see his mistress. So it's almost like that area is being judged by a supernatural presence in the usage of the Dr. Eckleburg's eyes.